81, 83, 49, 66. What do these figures have in common? They all relate to burnout, that sense of being utterly depleted, worn out, and chronically exhausted. Recent research shows that work burnout affects 81% of those who are 18 to 24, 83% of those 25 to 34, and 49% of those over 55. When averaged, a whopping 66% of working adults report experiencing burnout. Even worse, these figures don't account for groups such as full-time parents, family caregivers, and undocumented workers, all of whom often experience significant levels of stress and burnout. And while there is no magic cure for burnout, there are steps we can take to minimize the stress and negative cycles that tend to feed the burnout phenomenon. Today, I'm joined by a seasoned burnout expert who will give us well-honed tools to help us stop burnout in its tracks and move forward in healthy ways. Today, we'll focus on this listener's real-life question. I love your podcast. It helps during my long commute to work. I know this sounds weird, but I missed the pandemic because I could work from home. There was a lot less stress and I actually got more done. I've had to return to the office, no more working from home, and it sucks because I got used to life without a 2-hour commute each way. I feel way more stressed all around. My coworkers don't seem as happy and the commute seems longer. Everything feels worse and I feel really old, but I'm only 27. Do you have any suggestions? And with that issue as the focus of today's episode, I'm Dr. Carla Marie Manley, and this is Imperfect Love. Please note, as this episode may contain sensitive information, listener discretion is advised. If you need support, please see the special links in the show notes. Welcome to Imperfect Love with Dr. Carla Marie Manley, psychologist, author, and relationship expert. I'm here to help unravel mysteries and misconceptions about love, relationships, and mental health issues, plus everything in between. Love is complicated, people are imperfect, and relationships surely can be tough. Together, we'll navigate this messy, imperfect space of real life. Today, I'm joined by a delightful special guest, Janice Litvin. Janice is a burnout expert, author, and professional consultant. Welcome to the podcast, Janice. It's such a delight to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carla Marie Manley. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I so appreciate all the work you do because not only do you help spread information about stopping burnout, healing from burnout, but you really promote overall wellness in the workplace and outside of the workplace. And that's a big task in today's stress-filled world. So thank you for all the work that you do. And before we launch into responding to this listener's question, could you tell our listeners just a little bit about what makes you you?
Wow, that I could go on for the whole time talking about what makes me me, but I think I'm a combination of the people that came before me, my parents especially, my grandparents, the culture that was passed down to have a work hard and a good strong ethic, to love other people. And I find luckily, and I've been told this many times, when I deliver keynote talks, people come up to me and say, you're so energetic, you're so enthusiastic, and you have a lot of intuition. And so I think that answers your question.
Oh, that's beautiful. And it sounds as if your heritage, the intergenerational parts of what have come down to you, it sounds like it's so love-filled and energetic and diligent, very much this. And I could tell because I met you just briefly before the podcast, You do have a lot of energy. So it's your parents and your grandparents. Where did they hail from? From the US?
My grandparents came from Latvia, which at the time was owned by Russia. And my mother was actually born there, but within the first year, they emigrated to America. And there's so many stories about being chased by the Cossacks and having to be really hard workers and hard drivers. And my mother used to always say, "You don't have to like your job; you just have to do your job." Of course, that comes from somebody who grew up during the Great Depression. So we don't have that kind of attitude anymore in the workplace. But it's kind of an underlying theme that came through my life.
Thank you. And that's a really lovely way to pivot into this listener's question because they're talking about that, about not being happy at work. And we have become very accustomed. Our not so distant ancestors did what they needed to do, whether it was working in the fields or, picking up coal or whatever they were working in the coal mines. And liking your job wasn't nearly as important as having a job so you could feed your family. And now we've evolved to a place in life where we do want to and expect to at least like our jobs. And when I was reading the question from the listener, I thought, I've been there. Not the 2 hour commute part. That sounds absolutely miserable. But, doing a job before my career as a clinical psychologist, a job that I did not because I liked it, but because I had to pay bills. So it's not an uncommon theme. Let's talk about your perspective on burnout and what causes it. And then we can pivot into some tips and tools to help our listeners have some really good takeaways about what they can do to combat burnout and heal from it.
There are two main causes of burnout, in my opinion, and I've done a lot of thinking about this, as you can imagine. First of all, burnout can come from our internal thoughts and feelings and how we react to stress and how we were role modeled. Were we in a family of overreactors? Were we in a family of victims where everything's somebody else's fault? So there's a lot about the heritage within the family. What I have come to learn and experience for my clients is that burnout can also come from the environment, the organizational values and policies, like your listener who has to drive to work 2 hours each way. That's a ridiculous policy that a lot of CEOs put into practice after COVID. And there are many others. There are many other workplace events, so to speak, that happen because of all the various personalities. Every workplace is a melting pot of a mix of personalities and cultures, especially nowadays, and especially here in California, where it's okay to do certain behavior in one culture, but not in another. For example, I held a leadership roundtable a few months ago, and one woman who came from an Asian culture said, "I would never say no to anybody ever, especially my bosses. And I'm here to teach people how to push back and say no without saying no so that they can set healthy boundaries and take care of themselves."
Thank you. And so let's segment this because there's already a lot on the table.
Right.
Let's first look at the internal factors that contribute to stress and often the burnout that results from the stress and the ongoing stress. And look at how those internal voices, that the training that maybe has been passed down from generations. I know from my experience, God love my parents, they were wonderful human beings who worked very, very hard. And the idea with work was put your nose down, put your head down, and just do what needs to be done. Period. It's all about, success. And so that ethos, which is still in many of us or many of our parents, it is the part that we want to start to dismantle to see if it's there. And I work with young adults and older adults and people in the middle. And even though there is less of that in the younger age groups, it's still there. All of those should messages that say, I should just do this. As you said, in some cultures, saying no, especially to, an authority figure, is absolutely not going to happen. So, what do you see as a way for people to realize that they have this internal mantra about just doing what is supposed to be done, what should be done, rather than finding that balance of what feels good to the self, but also allows one to be successful in life?
So, number one, what I've been thinking about while you were speaking, and it happens to be the first tool in my book, Banish Burnout Toolkit, is self-awareness. And so that takes everything that you talked about into consideration. Awareness of how I behave, how I react, how I think and feel in reaction to something that someone else says or does. Like I said, some of that comes down through the generational training, and some of it comes down from our own life experience. And so rather than being an overreactor, becoming aware, and this didn't happen to me. And by the way, I should tell you, and I forgot to tell you before, I had 8 years of therapy with a Jungian therapist in which after the 8 years, I thought, okay, I'm done. I've solved all my problems with my family and my parents and how I live and who I am and how to make sense of my independence. And then a few years, and that was many years ago. And then a few years ago, I became aware, you know how they talk about peeling the onion and you
Oh,
get
yes.
deeper
Oh,
and deeper
yes.
layers. So a few years ago, I realized that there was still an issue where I would set myself up to feel rejected from time to time. And I decided to go on a little research adventure with myself to figure out when and how that was happening and how there was a pattern in my thought processes that caused me to feel these feelings. And it all happened one day when I was with my mother at a family event on the East Coast where they grew up. And my mother said something that sparked me into awareness that all of that role modeling of her setting herself up to feel rejected came down to me because that's what I saw. And that's all I knew. That was my beloved mother, who is, and we like to think of our mothers as perfect on the one sense, in that true unconditional love sense. And on the other, they're dealing with issues and they're doing the best they can. And so I realized that I inherited those feelings from my mother. That was a huge awareness for me.
And I really appreciate that you gave us this personal perspective because we often think after being in therapy, whether it's 8 sessions or 8 years of sessions, that it's done. And it's my fourth book, The Joy of Imperfect Love, I talk about every chapter begins with a cabochon, a gemstone that's a polished, cabochons are these gemstones that are polished, and remind myself as I wrote and readers that this process of becoming is one that we are evolving, especially if we're mindful. Then we're blessed enough to evolve throughout our lives till the time we have our very last breath. So the idea of therapy is one and done, or therapy is one book and then we're done, or one couple session and then we're done, or one burnout coach and then we're done.
Right.
It's the idea of because life will bring us new stressors and another layer of the onion to keep peeling, which is part of the beauty of being human. We are so imperfect that we get the privilege of continuing to polish and polish. So I really appreciate you brought up that piece. I think the other really important piece that you touched upon is how important it is to start with self awareness. I agree. We're very much in accord on that, that without our self awareness, we do slip into old patterns like blaming or saying it's mom's fault or dad's fault or the boss's fault, or look at what everybody does to me. Nobody wants me. Everybody rejects me. And, or, everybody, whatever. And when we start looking at, wait a minute, what's going on inside here? What can I do about this individual? Now, there may be people out there that are negative and harmful to you, and their behaviors are. But then you learn coping strategies. You learn how to have boundaries with them. You learn not to let them get to you, how to keep away from them, and that sort of thing, and push back when necessary. But all of these things lead back to your first point in your book, which I didn't know was your first point. So thank you. The self-awareness is so critical. So we can offer that to all of our listeners and the individual who wrote in. Look for the self-awareness, which how would I know how I encourage people to develop more self-awareness? How do you encourage people to develop self-awareness?
Well, first and foremost is journaling, as I'm sure you'll agree, because when you write with a pen and a piece of paper, and if you really have to use a device, okay, fine. But something different gets activated and triggered in the brain when you actually write with your hands, and things come out, different triggers come out that help you make sense of different elements that happen in life that are still, I call them prickers or stingers, triggers that are bothering us today. So someone comes and says something that seems innocuous, and you have this overreaction. And it happens to all of us, even those of us who feel they're self-aware. And you think, wow, there must be a trigger that is still holding power over me. And so taking back the power by getting to know ourselves deeply when things happen is extremely important and powerful.
Excellent. Let's pause on the journaling. I too agree in the power of journaling. It sounds like we had this discussion beforehand, but we didn't. It just happens that we're very aligned. And being trained as a Jungian therapist, Carl Jung's work, it makes sense that journaling helps us delve into the unconscious mind. And I have a really quick story that is appropriate to this. I love dismantling dreams. I do it for clients, I do it for myself. And a couple of weeks ago, I had this dream, and I can usually tease them apart, but I wanted to take the quick lane instead of journaling about it. And I asked my husband, I said, honey, what do you think of this dream? He's not very Jungian oriented at all. He was like, no, it sounds weird. I said, thanks,
Right.
sweetheart. And so I did what I would normally do. I journaled. And by the end of the second page, and I agree, and research shows something magical happens with pen to paper or pencil to paper. The brain really loves that there's a flow. Again, I agree with you. If you can't do that and all you have is a device, use the device. But by the end of just that second page, I went, oh, that's what the dream was about. It unraveled itself just as I wasn't even trying, just as I was writing out to the end, finished the last sentence. I said, oh, silly me, there it was right there. And so that is indeed the power of journaling. We might not get to the end of a page of journaling and have an answer, but I found that the more we journal, non judgmental journaling, free association journaling, not checking for grammar, spelling, or how pretty your writing is, just letting the psyche unleash. Sometimes it's hours afterward, sometimes a day later, a week later, we go, oh, I had this magnificent insight. So I agree with you. I'm so glad we paused on the self awareness piece, because whether it's journaling, talking to a therapist, a mentor, a non judgmental friend, or family member, having a place where we can think, where we can talk things out and have someone we trust reflect back to us what might be happening, it gets the psyche going. So, okay, excellent. What's another tip for our listeners about developing more internal awareness about where this stress is coming from, where this burnout is coming from?
Well, believe it or not, and you already said something, you said the word pause, and pausing is crucial to give you a chance in the heat of battle, so to speak, in the middle of a situation, whether it's with another person or just in line at the grocery store with negative feelings that might be happening because the line's moving too slowly for you. Pausing and asking yourself, does this situation really warrant this degree of anger and anxiety? Quite often the answer is no, especially if you have an overreacting kind of mind like I do.
Mhm.
So, do I need to be this upset? I'll tell you a really quick vignette because it fits. It's sort of a mundane situation, but it really fits. So, one day I was in a hurry, which is not ever a good thing. And we were having a birthday party for my son's girlfriend at the time. And she loved this one store. So, I wanted to get her the gift card for this one store. So I go to this gigantic Safeway. For those who don't know, it's a grocery chain on the West Coast. I go to this gigantic Safeway and I'm walking through. They have 3 aisles of gift cards.
Oh
Can you
my.
imagine? And they're like this big. And you're trying to find one particular gift card. And I'm looking, and I'm watching my watch because I'm in a hurry. And oh, I can't find this gift card. These stupid people told me the gift card was here. Why can't I find it? Oh my gosh, I'm so irritated. I'm going to really express my anger when I get to the front of the store. So I'm marching through this long store in a hurry, aggravated. And as I'm walking, and by the way, I've already done the work and I've already written this book by the time this is happening. So I have a lot of self-awareness. And so I'm walking to the front and I thankfully caught myself in the act and I had a little talk with myself and I said, why are you so angry about this situation? Do you need to be this upset? So what if you're late? 10 minutes late to a party? People don't always come exactly at the starting time. Why are you so angry? Do you need to be this angry? And I said to myself, no, I don't. And I can choose to smile at myself and smile at the person at the front of the store and say, pardon me, could you help me, please? I'm having so much trouble finding this one gift card for my son's girlfriend. Could you please help me? And by the way, how is your day going? My son taught me that. Asking people, how is your day going? Even though they're there to serve you, showing that you care not only makes them happy, it makes you happy.
And that's a beautiful story because it's a reminder that if we can envision, something that helps us slow down and take that pause it's easy in today's busy world to get dysregulated and to not even be aware that we're dysregulated. So whether you envision a stop sign, for me, I like envisioning a field of lavender. Some people, it's really helpful for them to count like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I often have people who get so dysregulated that for them, working from 10 backward is necessary in order to just get to a place of calm so they can ask themselves, is this big reaction warranted in this situation? And without judgment, generally our big reactions are coming from a place of overwhelm or fear that are bigger than the situation calls for. And so that I think is one of the big stress management. Thank you for calling it out because those stress management tips of remembering just pause, it's okay. Doesn't matter, where you are, unless you're, in the middle of a freeway, you don't want to pause on the freeway, but usually pause, pull over, not engage in road rage or work rage or anything, work rage, but instead just realize, wait a second, this might be an accumulation of a long week. Or maybe I'm hungry. Maybe I'm tired. The old HALTS acronym.
Yes.
Am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I tired? Am I lonely? Am I stressed? Am I all of these things? Or it's hunger. HALT says hunger, anger, lonely, tired, stressed. So you go through that checklist. And if you're ticking off any of them, then it's nice to, if you can, to take a pause. And the more you check off, the more likely you are to be in a place where burnout, if you're chronically in that state of being hungry, angry, lonely, tired, stressed, burnout is going to come very quickly.
I'd like to point out, and I know you already know this with your training and your background, that there's a huge difference between stressed and burned out. A lot of people come and say, "Oh, I'm so burned out. I'm so burned out." What really they're saying is, I am very stressed and I am burning, ing. I am burning out. I'm not burned out, because if you're burned out, you're going on disability for 6 months. That's true burnout, mental and emotional, complete exhaustion, where you can only lay in a field of poppies or lavender in your case, or lay on the beach or sit on a farm and look at the birds and the trees. That's burnout. But we don't want people to get to that point.
Absolutely. And I think if we look at burnout in, say, shades or degrees, as you're saying, getting there, and stress is a big factor in it. It's the chronic stress that can lead. And some people, I've seen people who I would qualify for being burned out, and they are still chugging along. They might not be making good decisions. They might be a bit out of it at times, but because that push to show up at work to bring home that check, it is almost like, and I've had people explain it, it's like I'm the walking dead. And that is the idea you're explaining of, hey, they're in the field, or I mean, they're there. But for some people, and I think we also see this a lot in the medical community where, there are people who get so burnt out, especially after a big crisis like COVID or natural disasters, and they're chugging along, but they're not present. And I think that it's important to see that, at least for this podcast, as a continuum, that we get closer and closer to that place where it is as though, I had one person describe it as a car crash. They were hit by a car crash overnight. It felt overnight. They weren't able to see at the time it was a progression to that point where they were debilitated.
Because they were not staying aware
Yes.
throughout the period.
Yes.
And that's why daily check-ins with ourselves is so important. Or if you have a loved one or a best friend at work, where you can go for coffee and, how are you doing today? How are you feeling today? Many years ago, I was a tech recruiter working from home all alone. And I had a circle of recruiter friends, and and all of our work was on the phone long before email or internet. And so every morning I would spend the first 30 minutes of my day checking in with a couple of these different friends. How are you doing today? How's your workflow? Do you have any problems? How are you feeling? And we would do this quick little daily check-in, 5 or 10 minute conversation with a couple of people. And it gave me a really wonderful way to start my day.
Thank you for that. That is a really good tip because you're talking about connection. The
Yes.
power of connection, the
Yes.
power of support. And just going back for a moment to your story about the gift card, in a very small way, you connected with that clerk at the store. You checked in, you got their support, they went, they helped you. But doing that with a group of coworkers or friends every day, that check in, that how are you? How are you doing? You're connecting with another person. And then when they ask you, how are you doing? Especially if you're working on self awareness, instead of the obligatory, I'm fine, I'm good, you would then dig in and say, I'm feeling a bit, challenged, or I'm feeling really weary. Or, oh my goodness, I'm actually doing really well because my boss allowed me to work from home one day a week, or whatever
Yes.
it is. So you're focusing on what's working and trying to do more of that. You're also talking about what's not working. And maybe, would you say, trying to get ideas of what you could do to shift what's not working?
Well, absolutely, especially if it's a personal issue or a business issue. I'm having this problem with this client. They don't want to budge. What suggestions do you have? Because we're alone in a vacuum, but work problems sometimes require a perspective outside ourselves. so we can see the big picture.
Absolutely. And it's also, Janice, of course, not just at work. So for those who are listening who might be a stay-at-home parent, this applies to you too. We can't see often outside of our heads, even as well-trained therapists like me. I can't often, sometimes I need to speak to someone else who can give me a different perspective, someone I trust. Why? Because we're not omniscient. And being able to talk to, again, always someone you trust, a trained psychotherapist, a trusted family member, a partner, a mentor at work, so that you don't have to listen to what other people might offer as feedback. But sometimes, I love this part about humanity, sometimes just us being able to voice our concerns when we hear ourselves talking to someone else. Sometimes those light bulbs go on. It's like, oh, I think that my perfectionistic streak is really at work here. It's keeping me going 20 times longer, and then I'm mad at the boss for not knowing that I went overboard and dotted every I and crossed every T, and the boss didn't notice because that wasn't what the boss needed. But it's sometimes our perfectionism that is causing us to do that. Things like that, that someone that you trust can reflect it back to you. So you're talking about having some sort of ongoing source of support.
You know, you brought something up just now that opens up another can of worms, of course, and I could talk to you all day. The boss cannot read your mind. So your person that wrote in and is 27 and commuting 2 hours each way. Well, you've brought up a few things. Number one is negotiating working from home 1 or 2 days a week is maybe a possibility, but communicating with the boss about what's going on with you, because some bosses, and I had one at one company I won't mention, she assumed because I was such a strong person and had such a big personality that I was always okay because I had this outward facade of being happy because I
Mhm.
was so rambunctious and outgoing. That doesn't mean I'm not feeling stress about my work from time to time. She never said to me, "How's it going? How are you doing? Do you need any resources? Do you need any help with any of your projects?" It was just business, business, business.
I agree with you that it is so important. I'm just thinking of my last client yesterday, a younger individual, and we were having the same discussion. I said, perhaps, she realized what one of her big concerns was. It came to her as we were talking. And I said, why don't you talk to this individual about what your experience is? She said, oh my goodness, I couldn't do that. And I said, well, why not? And so she came to realize, oh, well, actually I can. So she left our time together feeling ever so excited. It was interesting. It didn't go into, she moved through her anxiety and got to a place of, this is a great opportunity. I'm going to talk to this person and I'm going to see if I can facilitate change. And even though we prepared, this individual on the other end might not be receptive. We can't count on someone else being receptive to our needs, but we can do everything in our power to be aware of our needs, voice our needs, stand in our truth. And if it's something really important to us, and the person on the other side, be it a boss, a coworker, a partner, whatever it is, if they're not able to meet a critical need, then it's might be time to look at a pivot.
Right. Or, and I was thinking that too, but I also had another thought. There are other ways to find mentors in the workplace. Now, while we all hope that our immediate manager is our mentor and best coach, not every manager is perfect. And everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, just like a parent. So if your company has an employee resource group, are you familiar with employee resource groups?
Yes.
Okay, of course. So getting involved in employee resource groups and volunteering to help run the group gets you exposed to many more people. And sometimes from that population, you can find a mentor to work with you, maybe meet you for coffee once a week, for 15 minutes and say, I'd love to pick your brain. I'd love to ask you some questions. Do you have some advice for navigating this situation? Sometimes they can give you some feedback because maybe they know that boss better and have a deeper understanding of what it's like to be a boss in that organization.
And you're talking here about bigger organizations who have employee resource groups and that type of really wonderful support for employees. Yet, for employees who don't have that type of support, those who are in smaller companies where the idea of an HR team, it's just, human resources, like what? So, what would you recommend for someone who is in a smaller company where they feel very much alone? They have coworkers, but just maybe one boss. What would you encourage them to do if they're feeling really stressed at work, heading toward that place of severe burnout? And in this case, feeling, I don't know what the size of the company is, but we don't know. Maybe it's just 20 employees and no HR. So what would you imagine someone can do in order to get support that can help them maybe stay in the company if that's where they want to stay, but change things up enough so that they're not feeling so chronically stressed and burdened?
Okay, there's a couple of things. Number one, form your own, I'm going to use the word mastermind, even though that's not the exact right word. Form your own social club or mastermind group within the organization. Try to connect. First of all, we can talk all day about social connection and how valuable that is, but creating your own little family within the organization of people. And this is not a pity party or a complainers party. This is more of a social support and constructive feedback. Maybe the person needs to rethink their point of view if they're feeling too self-centered. That's another issue. But the point is to have people to support you. Now, if there's nobody that you feel like you can trust, because there has to be an element of trust, I highly recommend joining an association of your business work, whether it's accounting, architect, finance, HR. There are over 60,000 associations in the United States.
I had no idea.
And most of them have a way, some are bigger than others. Like, for example, SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Management, is gigantic. 20,000 people go to the annual conference. I was lucky enough to speak there last year. But every organization has a way for people to get together and get to know each other. Could be monthly meetings and an annual in-person meeting. The monthly meetings can be in person or on Zoom. And most of these associations want to help people connect with each other.
And again, thank you. Great tip. And taking it, yes, in the workplace, wonderful resources. Again, we're talking about the power of support, the
Yes.
power of community. And research shows us over and over and over again that at all ages, having community and community you can trust, people who get you and you feel safe with them. And for those who are not in an office environment or don't have a company where there's HR, remember, let's say you're a stay-at-home dad or a stay-at-home mom, or your full-time job is caring for your dad with Alzheimer's, something like that. Remember, there is support out there, whether through meetup groups or your local community center.
Yes.
And if that feels like yet another task, maybe someone who's not, maybe a best friend or a sibling can do some Googling for you, can do some research for you if it feels too overwhelming. Because that's the other piece I've noticed. When people are at toward that really far end of the stress continuum, where the stress is just snowballing and burnout is just like right there around the corner, it's already starting to set in. They're often the ones who feel so depleted that the idea of Googling something for themselves, the idea of finding a support group, they don't
Right.
have the energy for it. They're the
Right.
ones who need it most, but they don't have the energy. And that's again and that's so normal. It's so normal. And I talk to people, it's like the person who was in a car wreck. they need people to come in and help them and support them. They can't do it for themselves. And we never, ever want to be ashamed or feel guilty for that. We just want to realize that's a beautiful part of being imperfect human beings. There are many times in life when reaching out for support from others is the wisest thing we can do. And for someone who is suffering and let's say they can't afford a psychologist, or they maybe a trip to their doctor if they have, a doctor. And often doctors, GPs, family physicians can be a great source of referrals, or their staff will have referrals. So community centers, community hospitals, all of these places are such a wealth of information so that you don't get to that place as you're talking about where you can't move. You are so burnt out that you are flat on your back. And sometimes people mistake being depressed with being burnt out. And depression can come with burnout, but we also want to have someone do an evaluation so that we know what we're facing. How are we doing, how is our checkup with our physician? How's our body doing? Then a check in with how's the mind and, of course, the spirit. So doing these self checks are a critical part of the self care. All right, back to you. I wish we had so much more time together, but what are one or two more tips, Janice, that you could offer our listeners, whether it's a daily care routine or strategies in the office? Because we've covered so much looking within, looking at getting external resources and support. What else would you say are so other than all of the toolkits in your Banish Burnout Toolkit book? Listeners, resources will be in the show notes, so don't worry about that. What else would you offer? Just a few highlights.
Well, one thing that I didn't learn until later in my career is how to take more control over my career. So a younger person like your 27-year-old who's commuting might not realize that it's up to me to learn how to navigate my career. My particular boss may not be able or know how to help me navigate my career. So that includes pushing back about commuting 2 hours, maybe pushing back about a work assignment, maybe saying, boy, I really love this work. What would help me and help the company is having me work from home twice a week, because we're wasting all this mental and emotional and physical energy having me commute, especially if she's driving. We didn't know if you didn't say if she was driving or commuting on a train. She's on a train. There's certain things she can do, like listen to your podcast or her journaling or some calm daily reading that can help her set herself up for her day, or watching a video that makes her happy. So, but if she's driving, then she can't read, but she can listen to audiobooks or the podcast. But anyway, my point is that sometimes we have to learn that it's on us. It's on us to ask for a raise. It's on us to navigate our career. It's on us to find a coach to say, what is the next step in my career and what should I be learning now to prepare myself to move to that next step? That might be your boss, but it might be another mentor. Or it might be a mentor from a different company. It could be someone you know from your church or synagogue. It might not be someone in your direct realm at work.
Absolutely, because there are unexpected resources out there, whether it's a neighbor, the next house or apartment over, whether it's someone in your spiritual or religious community. A big piece is learning to ask for help and knowing that that's not only okay, it's part of being human. It's what really feeds us is when we're connected and when we can give support and receive support. It's a really important part of many many animal groups. So you think of elephants and
Right.
chimpanzees, and of course, it's really important. I appreciate that you brought up the part about the commute as well, because there is a big difference for somebody who's commuting on a train where maybe they're listening to, all of these different podcasts and watching videos and reading a book. And yet for someone who's driving, I do have to say, in our area, the commute to, say, San Francisco, depending on the time of day, it's gnarly.
Yeah.
And the stress that can be caused just by being, you might not even hear if you're listening to a podcast or a book because your anger inside is so big, it's like going over top of everything. So realizing sometimes what you're doing might be a deal breaker. Sometimes the commute is a deal breaker. Sometimes the boss is a deal breaker. Sometimes there's something in that external dynamic, not your internal world. But sometimes we do have to look and say, this isn't, maybe it's a well paying job. Maybe it is. Maybe it has a great, forward momentum. But you, listeners, have the right and the responsibility to pause and ask yourself, if I'm doing everything I can in my internal world, but these external factors are just, the universe is telling me this is not a good fit. I'm not meant to be a salesperson or a doctor or a lawyer or a baker 20 miles, away, whatever it is, that realizing it is okay and really a sign of courage and inner strength to evaluate that and start taking steps towards something that does feel good. What do you think about that,
Well,
Janet?
so many things. First of all, what I want to say is, and you mentioned that feeling of anger while you're driving from Sonoma County to the bridge. That feeling of frustration and anger is within your control. You can choose to be angry every day on your way to work, or you can choose to fill your heart and mind with more pleasant thoughts. Not that you're not valid in your thoughts, but anger hurts you. It does not hurt your boss because your boss isn't with you. It hurts you. And it's okay to go to your boss and say, I love this job. I'm learning so much and I'm contributing so much and I love working with you. I just cannot handle this 2 hour commute anymore. I'm not threatening, but I'm here to tell you that we really need to make some changes together. Together, we need to navigate a more doable situation because I'm feeling so stressed with the difficult commute and I have to drive and it's just too difficult. And let's work something out together. Let's find a win-win. I sometimes throw that word out to let the other person know that a win-win takes this person to make the win-win.
Absolutely. And I absolutely think that there is a time for negotiation like that. And let's hope that the boss steps up, especially if you really love your job. But there are times for someone, I can't even imagine, 2 hours this direction, 2 hours that direction. That is 4 hours. And I don't know if this individual has kids, husband, a wife, a boyfriend, a girlfriend. I don't know any of that. But realizing cumulatively, that's in a 5 day work week. That's 20 hours that this person may be saying, I want that 20 hours for self care, or I want that to spend with my friends or my family.
Yeah.
And so, this is again, we're going it back to where we began, the self awareness.
Yeah.
What do you need to do for you to minimize the stress and then make space so that you can begin to heal? Because stress and ongoing stress causes chronic inflammation in the body, which leads to health issues. And you're such a wellness advocate. So, speaking to someone who's all about this, but to our listeners, remember your health is, so important. So, doing what you need to do to create a lifestyle, if at all possible. I know there are times I've been there where I had to do what I had to do and I couldn't see enough down the line to realize that. But eventually did a segue and realizing that if you start making steps forward in another direction, if your current situation isn't right for you, to get support. Again, going back to that idea, if you're the full time family caregiver for, let's say, a mom or a dad who has Alzheimer's, then get the siblings on board, get the other people on board. You can have boundaries. If you don't have siblings and you're the only one, reach out to senior services so we can take all of these tips that you've given us and expand them to see that they will help us reduce stress and the stress that causes burnout if we really start with self-reflection and then action, slow but steady action to create a life that has more ease. What do you think about that, Janice?
Love that. And again, about the person taking care of their elderly relative, Medicare, believe it or not, Medicare has a lot of free services that that elderly person might qualify for based on their financial status. And so we don't know till we ask. We don't know till we ask. And Alzheimer's and cancer and all these groups do have ways to get community support. So if the siblings can't or won't get on board, or they live in a different state, then reach outside your community.
Absolutely. Support, support, support. Janice, thank you so much for your wisdom, for your energy, for your kindness. Where can our listeners find you?
They can find me at janicelitvin.com, and I have a free gift. Everyone is able to download this Banish Burnout Toolkit, which is a workbook full of ways to help learn how to develop the pause, learn how to build your self-awareness. And that free link is, and I know you'll put this in the show notes, janicelitvin.com/resources-book BBT. BBT stands for Banish Burnout Toolkit. So janicelitvin.com/resources-book BBT.
Thank you. And listeners, this will all be in the show notes. But Janice's spelling on her name, Janice, Litvin, Litvin. Again, don't worry, it'll be in the show notes. And if you're not watching the video, you didn't get a chance to see the Banish Burnout Toolkit interior. It is not intimidating. There are even pictures to help us. So I love pictures in books. And so it's very user-friendly, very approachable. And thank you for that gift, Janice. Listeners, download free. Yes, all good. Thank you again, Janice. I'm so grateful.
Thank you so much. I so enjoyed our conversation.
You're welcome. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope this podcast helps you and those you love reduce burnout and find ways to move forward in much less stressed ways. And this is Imperfect Love. Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Remember, you have the power to transform your life and love fearlessly, if imperfectly, and it's my privilege to help you along the way. You can find more life-changing content, including my books and other podcast episodes, at drcarlamanley.com. Feel free to submit your own confidential questions through my website. I'll do my very best to include your issue on a future episode. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Until we connect again, this is Dr. Carla Marie Manley wishing you oceans of blessings and love. Please note, this podcast is psychoeducational in nature and is not intended to replace formal mental health support. Please contact your healthcare provider or emergency hotline if you need psychiatric care. And, as always, please take good care of your amazing, wonderful self.